Good day, dear children. Today I am here with the lesson in your Flamingo textbook, that is The Rat Trap. It is a story of a poor beggar, a rat trap seller. You get to know about his life, an important incident that took place in his life, which later proves to be a turning point. So let's get started with the author. Selma Lagerlöf was a Swedish writer whose stories have been translated into many languages. A universal theme runs through all of them, a belief that the essential goodness in a human being can be awakened through understanding and love. The story is set amidst the mines of Sweden, rich in iron ore, which figure large in the history and legends of that country. The story is told somewhat in the manner of a fairy tale. It gives us the message that the emotions of love and acceptance can reform others. So let's get started. Once upon a time, there was a man who went around selling small rat traps of wire. He made them himself at odd moments from the material he got by begging in the stores or at the big farms. But even so, the business was not especially profitable, so he had to resort to both begging and petty thievery to keep body and soul together. Even so, his clothes were in rags, his cheeks were sunken, and hunger gleamed in his eyes. Here you get some idea about the central character of the story, that is the rat trap seller. As the name suggests, he earned his living by selling small rat traps of wire. But his business did not earn him much profit, so he had to either beg or steal to survive. Now para 2. No one can imagine how sad and monotonous life can appear to such a vagabond who plods along the road left to his own meditations. But one day, this man had fallen into a line of thought which really seemed to him entertaining. He had naturally been thinking of his rat traps when suddenly he was struck by the idea that the whole world about him, the whole world with its lands and seas, cities and villages, was nothing but a big rat trap. It had never existed for any other purpose than to set baits for people. It offered riches and joys, shelter and food, heat and clothing, exactly as the rat trap offered cheese and pork. And as soon as anyone let himself be tempted to touch the bait, it closed in on him, and then everything came to an end. This rat trap seller was indeed leading a sad and boring life. In fact, he did not have any friends or family or any person whom he could cling on to. So he did not have anything much to do other than making rat traps. So one day, as he was thinking about his rat traps, probably because he did not have anything else to do, some thought came to his mind. I would say a philosophical thought came to his mind. As he looked around, he saw that the world had a lot of people running behind the comforts of life. So he compared the world to a big rat trap and the comforts of life to the baits that you keep inside a rat trap. And the people were running behind these comforts. Once they get trapped, once they are attracted to these baits or the comforts of life, the world closed in on them and they are finished. So he was happy to think of the world like this because the world has never been kind to him. So that is an interesting thought. Now let's move on to the third para. The world had, of course, never been very kind to him, so it gave him unwonted joy, unusual joy, to think ill of it in this way. It became a cherished pastime of his during many dreary ploddings, dull wanderings, to think of people he knew who had let themselves be caught in the dangerous snare, dangerous trap, and of others who were still circling around the bait. So here you find pondering over the thought that the world is a big rat trap, and even visualizing how the people got into the trap and how they are trapped inside the rat trap. All those things gave him an unwanted joy. So first three para is all about the rat trap seller, what he actually does, and the thought that comes to his mind. Now fourth para, you find he gets into a grey cottage and he meets a man. So let's get to know about it. Para 4. One dark evening, as he was trudging along the road, he caught sight of a little grey cottage by the roadside, and he knocked on the door to ask shelter for the night. Nor was he refused. Instead of the sour faces which ordinarily met him, the owner, who was an old man without wife or child, was happy to get someone to talk to in his loneliness. Immediately, he put the porridge pot on the fire and gave him supper. Then he carved off such a big slice from the tobacco roll that it was enough both for the stranger's pipe and his own. Finally, he got out an old pack of cards and played mullis with his guest until bedtime. So you find in that little grey cottage, he comes across an old man who was lonely. The old man was indeed happy to get a visitor at that point of time. So he gave him porridge, he gave him a big slice of tobacco roll, and also played with him. So there are 3 points regarding the owner. Next para. The old man was just as generous with his confidences as with his porridge and tobacco. The guest was informed at once that in his days of prosperity, his host had been a crofter. Crofter is a person who works on a rented farm at Ramsjow Iron Works and had worked on the land. Now that he was no longer able to do day labor, it was his cow which supported him. Yes, that Bossy was extraordinary. She could give milk for the creamery every day, and last month he had received all of 30 kroner in payment. So here you find the old man is sharing his secrets also with the rat trap seller. He is even willing to actually tell him about the money he had saved last month from his cow, that is by selling the milk of his cow. The stranger must have seemed incredulous, for the old man got up and went to the window, took down a leather pouch which hung on a nail in the very window frame, and picked out 3 wrinkled 10 krona bills. So the owner might have understood that rat trap seller is not ready to believe whatever he said. So he literally went to the place, took the money and showed it to the rat trap seller. These he held up before the eyes of his guest, nodding knowingly, and then stuffed them back into the pouch. The next day, both men got up in good season. The crofter was in a hurry to milk his cow, and the other man probably thought he should not stay in bed when the head of the house had gotten up. They left the cottage at the same time. The crofter locked the door and put the key in his pocket. The man with the rat traps said goodbye and thank you, and thereupon each went his own way. But half an hour later, the rat trap peddler stood again before the door. Just imagine, he is back again in front of the old crofter's house. What would it be for? He did not try to get in, however. He only went up to the window, smashed a pane, stuck in his hand, and got hold of the pouch with the 30 kroner. He took the money and thrust it into his own pocket. Then he hung the leather pouch very carefully back in its place and went away. So he has stolen the crofter. As he walked along with the money in his pocket, he felt quite pleased with his smartness. He realized, of course, that at first he dared not continue on the public highway, but must turn off the road into the woods. During the first hours, this caused him no difficulty. Later in the day, it became worse, for it was a big and confusing forest which he had gotten into. He tried to be sure to walk in a definite direction, but the paths twisted back and forth so strangely. He walked and walked without coming to the end of the wood, and finally he realized that he had only been walking around in the same part of the forest. All at once he recalled his thoughts about the world and the rat trap. Now his own turn had come. He had let himself be fooled by a bait and had been caught. The whole forest, with its trunks and branches, its thickets and fallen logs, closed in upon him like an impenetrable prison from which he could never escape. So here you find the rat trap seller himself is caught in the rat trap of the world. Here the bait is 30 kroner notes that he had stolen from the crofter's house. So that is the first incident. Now let's see what he's planning to do. It was late in December. Darkness was already descending over the forest. This increased the danger and increased also his gloom and despair. Finally, he saw no way out, and he sank down on the ground, tired to death, thinking that his last moment had come. So he lost all hope of escape and he thought he's going to die. But at that point of time, something happens. But just as he laid his head on the ground, he heard a sound, a hard, regular thumping. There was no doubt as to what that was. He raised himself. Those are the hammer strokes from an iron mill, he thought. There must be people nearby. He gathered all his strength, got up and staggered in the direction of the sound. So there is a light of hope for the peddler once he heard a sound from the distance.